Hello, ladies and gentlemen, friends, strangers, children, old people. It's your boy, Prez, aka @_Presidente, aka Isaiah Hartensteinbrenner, here with yet the latest episode of Draft Strickland. We're on season 3, episode 4. You'll have to forgive me for not bringing you all an episode last week as scheduled. I don't really have a good reason. I just didn't feel like it. We'll get back to regular schedules for sure once March Madness starts, but until then, we're kind of just building the plane as we're flying it. So if you're still listening, despite this egregious disrespect by me, your host, thank you very much. I sincerely appreciate your commitment to the strict land. With me today are two very special guests who are special for reasons that I'll get into shortly. The first guest, both are first-time Draft Strickland guests. The first guest is a V Strickland draft contributor, but also contributes to many other websites. It's Oscar from SWISH Theory, and joining Oscar is Neema, also from SWISH Theory, both of who put out lots of great draft-related work on Twitter and on SWISH Theory's actual website, which is pretty dope. If you haven't seen it, highly recommend it. We will talk a little bit about what makes the site so cool, but before that, I just want to thank y'all for joining us. How you doing today?
I'm doing good, bro. Thanks for having me. Excited to talk about prospects. I definitely felt you on the I just didn't feel like it thing. I tweeted out today that I was going to dive into some prospects, and then I watched a movie, went to the gym, came home and took a nap. I definitely didn't get that through. So don't feel bad, bro. It's I completely felt that.
Yeah, man. Sometimes Prez runs from the grind. I'm not going to lie. Unlike Dame Lillard. Oscar, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Happy to be here after listening for a couple of years now. Watched a bunch of Daron to prep for this pod this afternoon. Yeah.
I'm happy you did. That makes one of you. That makes one of us. I'm still behind on certain first rounders, and he's definitely among them. I guess since well, before we get to Daron, I just want to circle back. Listeners, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably some sort of a draft nerd, or you're about to become some sort of a draft nerd. So I really can't emphasize enough how much y'all need to check out SWISH Theory, the website that Neema and Oscar contribute to. There's been a couple of draft websites, but really not that many if you think about it through the years, right? There's No Ceilings came out last year or right before that. The Stepien was the mainstay for the nerdiest of nerds for a long time, and it has sunsetted finally after all their folks got hired all over the damn place. And aside from that, it's just DraftNet and Draft Express, which are now, or have been for some time. So there was a really big hole there for easily accessible, somewhat aesthetically pleasant, informative draft website. And it's not an accident that a lot of folks came together and formed SWISH Theory. And, it's obviously a lot different than how the Strickland formed, but it shares some things in that it was a lot of people who contributed to a lot of different websites seeing a call from people on the internet, from fanatics who just wanted a certain kind of content and just deciding, fuck it, we'll do it ourselves. So every time stuff drops on there, I get really excited, and including the stuff y'all write. And I just wanted to get that out there on the pod because we just organized, informative basketball analysis being easily accessible is not something we can get from ESPN and NBA TV and all that shit. So yeah. I can't imagine what do you do if you're not on Twitter? You just have to be friends with people who know ball or else you're fucked. That's it.
Yeah, dude, it's been a good trip so far. It's only been a couple months since we started, and it's blowing up pretty fast. And we got some like awesome people on there. Some of my favorite people, both in terms of just like their draft analysis and their the way they approach basketball, but also just people in general. Like Powell was on, or Matt Powers. He was one of the Stepien writers before, and he's had some awesome content on there. He just did a piece about like Pascal Siakam and how he goes about approaching isolation offense, and how Arthur Kaluma can draw from that. And then you have Charlie probably breaking down the Warriors better than anybody out there at the moment.
Breaking down every single three-point attempt Klay Thompson ever took, which is actually people who are listening, not an exaggeration. He actually did that for an article.
Dude, yeah, and he did that for like 2 days, like just like multiple days straight, just watching like 3-point throw. I don't know how he did it. He's doing awesome work, and then just everybody else as well, just both in draft content. Everybody's putting in a ton of work behind the scenes, even when there's not stuff coming out on the website or coming out on Twitter. Like there's a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes with Swish Theory. So I'm just really excited to watch all of us grow, and hopefully see all these people in front offices in a couple of years. Everybody's really smart, Oscar included. And like everybody knows what they're doing, and everybody knows like they understand basketball really well. And it's great because you get a couple different takes here and there, and it's not a hive mind either. Like I wouldn't say everybody is really in line with each other in terms of how we approach basketball or how we approach certain prospects. So it's not like a group of people all diving into one prospect together and being like we all love Jarace. There's definitely some torn people.
Yeah.
So
not Oscar though.
No, Oscar loves torn. I love Jarace too, bro. But but yeah, it's awesome, and I've really enjoyed it the last few months. I'm really excited. Once we get closer to March Madness and the actual draft itself, just to kind of see what content comes out and how we build on from here.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Neema said. Those Charlie and Powell pieces were like incredible. But yeah, we have like a really good group of guys. I think I like knew most of them before Swish was like founded. So it's like a really good kind of environment and like vibe to like bounce ideas off each other. And yeah, really excited for stuff we have planned.
I was fully on board from the get-go because half of y'all motherfuckers were like half the roster of last year's draft Strickland guests, except for you two. So late on the wagon here, but but not too late, just in time. So I'm happy we finally got y'all on here. Okay, we can begin getting into it. So there's a couple of themes that'll emerge from the prospects we're talking about today, but the first one I want to start out with is Daron Holmes, a big man. I don't know where he ranks in the non-Wemby center prospects to y'all, but I feel like this year, this is why I wanted to talk about Daron Holmes, because he, right now in the NBA, I feel like we're seeing a slight big man renaissance, and not just like last year you had the MVP race, right? So obviously you have prototype. I shouldn't say prototype because they're fucking unicorns, but like Jokic and Embiid are very large centers, and then you have gigantic other weird dragon beasts like Giannis, who are basically big men but not. And then now you're seeing like further down the line in the standings other teams with bigs who you have to have who are good enough to earn financial commitment from their teams, who impact winning in special ways, even if they're probably never going to make an all-star team, right? And like, there's so many of them right now. And it's really notable because for a while there, it felt like most good NBA teams fell into one of two categories for centers. Either you have a franchise player type center or possible franchise player type center. So like the MVPs or the Suns with DeAndre Ayton or whoever was employing DeMarcus Cousins in any given year, guys like that. And then you had teams that just had a rotation of good contract guys who could, one was more physical and could pop for threes a little bit. Another one was more mobile on defense. And, like I think of the pre-Robert Williams Celtics that had Theus and a bunch of other random guys, none of whom were super special, but together it allowed for the teams to be really versatile. And now you're not like, that's kind of not stopped. Some teams still do that, but like the Nets really rely on Nick Claxton. The Knicks really rely on Mitchell Robinson. The Cavs really rely on Jared Allen. And on emerging teams, you're seeing guys like that set themselves up to play similar roles in the future, like Jalen Duren. Like, even if he doesn't ever score 20 points a game, he's already like one of the best rebounders, and he's only like 12 years old. And even though he's built like Zeus. So you even the Hornets, who suck, have Mason Plumlee averaging like 20 and 10 and 4 since 2023 started. And he's probably going to get like a protected first from someone maybe. So first of all, do y'all have any idea why this is? Like, I have my own theories, but I'm just kind of curious. Like, this just kind of happened, and maybe I was just sleeping and it happened while I was asleep or something. But what do y'all think? Am I off here, or does this sound right?
I think, yeah, it sounds right, man. I think teams kind of realized how important size is. Especially just having like guys who can cover a ton of ground on defense. And like, you talk a lot of the guys you talked about, Jokic, Embiid, okay, those guys are outliers. But then you even look down the line, like the Rockets are running stuff through Şengün right now. Jakob Poeltl is like a staple in the Spurs lineup. Right. Like there's a lot of big men around the league. I mean, like even Pascal 6'9", they moved him to the center. And they're running a bunch
Precious
of
Achiuwa erasure on my podcast. I will not stand for it.
My fault. Precious as well. But then, I mean, even the Knicks, like I love Hartenstein. You have Mitch Robb. You have a bunch of other So like, you have all these bigs who are skilled in their own ways, both offensively and defensively, and they bring their own thing to the offense. And then you look at some of the other players in the league, it's like, man, you can have a 6'11" guy doing this, 6'9", 6'10", 6'11" guy doing this, or you can have a 6'7" guy out there doing the exact same thing. At some point you take the height, and there's teams like the Magic taking that to a whole other level. But I think that we are kind of, like you said, in a big man renaissance. It helps that a lot of these big men are, especially the incoming big men in the last couple of years, are incredibly skilled. I unfortunately don't think this class is going to contribute much to that aside from Wembanyama. You were talking about like, where does Daron Holmes kind of stack in terms of like the best bigs in this class? He's probably like top 3, top 4 at worst, in my opinion. And I don't think that speaks well for like Daron. I think that speaks more towards like the depth in big men in this class. I don't know if Oscar feels the same way, but I don't think this is a great big man class by any means. I think it's Wemby, and then it's a steep drop off to like guys who I think may be able to start one day. I don't think there's a lot of deep potential with the big men in this class.
Oscar, real quick, just a follow-up question for you. So I'm interested in your answer to the same question, but like a related thing is, all right, whatever you think of like this quote unquote big man renaissance or like mini renaissance, like, we used to hear a lot of people think, okay, because there's so many bigs and everybody who doesn't have an MVP big is just rotating out like $8 million dudes. Like, I'm not drafting a big in the first round. I could just find someone who's a hooper and 7 feet tall and actually ends up getting paid $10 million, just not on the street, but in the second round or off someone else's hands who's already in the league and is now switching teams or whatever. So like, where are you on the state of the big man today, and how does that kind of tie into how you're looking at bigs in the draft, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like a pretty well-known phenomenon that like when the league goes one way, like the rest of the league counters, right? And so this is like this is played out, but we know that the Warriors, their dynasty kind of made everyone think that you need a switch big who can move. But I think that as they've kind of fallen off, and we've seen like pick and roll heavy teams kind of repopulate the top of the conferences, I think that people are realizing that rim protection is a way to limit threes, by proxy of like, rim pressure is what generates most open threes, right? So like if you can have an anchor back there, it really does help limit the number of open threes. And just having Jokic and Embiid and then Giannis, like huge talents, like huge literally, but also like super talented. Having them kind of emerge, even if it's only a couple of them, like having those type of stars at the top of the league, I think, will impact the whole league, like as a landscape. As for this class, yeah, like Neema said, there's not like a ton of super interesting bigs. And like for Wemby, I mean, you're not really considering the
he's just his own thing.
Just like put him number one, right?
Yeah, that's an asterisk.
Right. Yeah, I mean, with Daron, I watched a little bit this afternoon. He was always one of the guys where I said, like, all right, if he declares, I'll give him like a full watch, but I never really got to him. But yeah, I mean, he's definitely skilled. I like his passing. I like his positioning on defense. It just seems like the tools are like definitely subpar for an NBA 5. Sorry, one sec.
I'm assuming this take was too hot, so the forces of evil were coming to to make sure he couldn't get that out into the streets. But we don't care here on Jazz Strickland. So tell him whatever knowledge he was about to drop, Oscar.
No, I mean, yeah, he's like the tools aren't great. Like 7'1" wingspan, and he's not like super great. Yeah, I was surprised when I looked up. I was expecting a little more than that.
Yeah, he looks
boy.
Yeah, I mean, Googling wingspans is always like a crapshoot. You kind of just have to wait until the combine. But yeah, I don't know. He's like I said, he's not the best vertically, even if his load time is good. And he doesn't shoot. I think I checked. He's like 5 of 12 from 3 on the year, and like takes a couple middies, but they're usually like late clock, and the form isn't great. So I don't know.
I only saw a couple threes, and
I mean, I'll defer to my mechanics, but I don't know. They seemed a little janky. But
does it look broken though?
No, it's not. It's not
I think his form could definitely use like.
It's definitely not clean.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, there's a reason.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a ton of confidence in it, I guess. I think his free throw percentage went up a little bit, but it's still like sub 70%. I mean, yeah, not a guy I want to bet on shooting. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely skills there, but I don't think there's enough in terms of like a full like big man skill set to consider him round 1.
So a related question before Neema explains why he is outraged and will not stand for this is forget Daron generally. Like forget Daron specifically, Oscar. Like, how are you? Not that there's any magical specific threshold that is consistent year to year for bigs, but like what kind of hypothetical things are you looking for in a big to be a first round big in a decent to good draft? Like, is there anything in particular?
I think the biggest thing is like scheme versatility in terms of pick and roll defense. That's the biggest one. Unless you're like an offensive minded big, which is like most of those guys are like true offensive minded 5s are like really like unique prospects most of the time. So I don't really think there's like a one rule for those guys. But yeah, scheme versatility, and then like clearly projects to be an above average rim protector, which is, a really high bar for college centers. So yeah, I would say those 2 things are generally my rule.
That's I think I'll steal that, because that's like watching the Knicks, right? We have 3 three centers, two of which are big, one of which isn't big, but is very jacked and a 99th percentile physical specimen in some ways in Jericho Sims. But like, if the Knicks obviously are probably the least scheme versatile team in terms of how they deploy centers, and Sims isn't really a good rim protector, but he's only theoretically scheme versatile, so we don't really see him deployed on switches that much. But if you look at the teams that do switch their schemes up the most for centers, there's still not many teams doing it like how the Warriors did it back in the day, where Draymond is just flying around on everyone. Like, even the Heat still drop Bam quite a lot, and he's pretty one of the most switchable guys. So like, that pick and roll defense and that rim protection, that's going to be probably the lion's share of your defensive value, right? Which is where my lack of confidence, or if you're other people on the Knicks internet, my raging evil hate for Jericho Sims comes into play, because he's not really good at either of those things yet. He might be, and he certainly has the potential to be. But you see what happens with him when you're kind of shaky at pick and roll and shaky at the rim. It's like you can be great at other stuff, and he is great at other stuff, but it leaves me a little wanting sometimes. But back to, is it Daron or Daron? Do we know?
I think it's Daron.
Daron. Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry, Daron. I've been fucking that up. Yeah, Neema. So, I mean, I watched like literally one half of Daron. I wanted to get around to more film, but I just didn't. And my first like extremely superficial observations was like, oh, he's narrow and skinny like Nick Claxton. But like, that obviously that's just the outline of the human physical figure that he has. It's not about his movement or wingspan or balance or anything like that. So could you just like high level, just paint a picture of what you think Daron Holmes is? Because I'm sure most of the people listening to this are like me in that they don't have any fucking idea who he is.
Yeah, I mean, so I think you said long and skinny. I think like Oscar said, his wingspan's only 7'1", which surprised me. And again, I think come combine time, that number might be a little bit different, because I feel like he has longer than a +3 wingspan. But I think he's strong as hell. He moves other people in the post like it's no big deal. He also holds his own in the post really well. And we're talking about this big man renaissance. There's 6-7 teams in the NBA running through post bigs right now, and having a guy who will hold their own against them, like on one-on-one possessions, is a pretty big deal. I think Daron can do that. I think he can do it pretty well. And then on top of that, he's not the greatest vertical athlete. He's not, we talked about it earlier in a group chat. He's not very good at backpedaling. He's not like his feet placement, stuff like that. It can get a little bit better, but he's super quick. And I think that's really important for a guy who's like 6'10". It's not about being fast. It's about being quick. Can you get into small spaces really fast? Can you make quick decisions? And he does that all the time. He's really good in the pick and roll. He's not a fantastic pick and roll defender just because he's a little laterally slow, but he gets like forward very quickly. And I think that helps him a lot, especially, just getting out on the perimeter if he does play in a switch heavy offense, or switch heavy defense, sorry. But going back to, like, I think the cell, like, his offense, yes, he doesn't bring everything you would want. He's not a fantastic shooter. His mid-range is getting a little bit better. His free throw percentage went up 8% on 2.5 more attempts per game. I think that's a significant amount of, like, both percentage and attempt wise. That's a significant raise. And then his field goal percentage is dipping a little bit, but it's because he's taking shots a little bit further from the rim, and he's doing a little bit less, or he's doing a little bit more offensively than he was last year. Last year was pretty basic with his post ups. This year he's getting into like post fades and step backs, like shooting from the nail and stuff like that. So he's getting a little bit more creative. And then I think one thing that benefits him a little bit is the Dayton offense is really big, and they have some fantastic passers. Like there's a Mongolian Mike. I will never try and pronounce his last name. Sharv Jumps, I think is what it is, but I'm sure I butchered that. Tumani Kamara, who is probably my favorite prospect in this class in terms of just being a guy who I think is super overlooked. He's extremely skilled on and off the ball. Mustafa Emzo, who's an amazing passer. He's like 6'11", and then they have Kobe Brea, who's a great shooter too. It's a very big team. All those guys are 6'6" plus, and the other 4 6'8" plus, aside from Brea. And all of them are really good passers. Holmes is not an exception to that. Like I think he's a pretty good passer for a big. He's not going to be, like a Şengün or Sabonis, but he's a great handoff guy. They put him in a lot of those possessions with Brea or Mike or even Kamara coming off of him. And so I think his versatility on offense is being kind of undersold. And then defensively, he's just like probably one of the best rim protectors in this class. And I think that's, like Oscar said, I do think that's a huge thing that, you need to be able to do as a big man. Pick and roll defense as well. And I think he does struggle on that a little bit, but you go to a team that is willing to put a little bit of effort into his like just athletic makeup. I think he has a good body. I don't think he's that athletically like limited. I think you look at some of the other big men, in the NCAA, and there's some freak athletes out there like Dylan Mitchell and stuff like that. But I also don't think a lot of those guys are good enough to be getting like serious NBA minutes. I think Daron is. And I think his post defense and his rim protection is what's gonna keep him around and what's gonna make him a first round pick. I don't think he's gonna go lotto. I've seen him a lot. A lot of people have him kind of back lotto or fringe lotto. I have him more kind of around like the 20 spot right now, like early 20s, maybe late teens. I can kind of justify, but I think this is a pretty stacked class from like 5 to 25 almost. And so like it really just comes down to what team picks him and who's willing to put him in the right situation and have the right defensive system around him. But I think he's very skilled in my opinion on both ends. He does a lot of little things that I think a lot of teams will like, and he doesn't really need the ball in his hands to be effective on offense. And again, like defense, probably one of the best rim protectors. If you're looking for a rim protector in this class, again, it's a horrible big man class for that. I wouldn't be surprised if some of the big men who a lot of people assume are going to enter return just because they've had bad seasons. So if you're looking for a rim protector, man, like you're not going to find another one as good as Holmes past 20. So like you might as well take him, in my opinion.
That's always an interesting dynamic because you're like, oh, not that many rim protectors. So maybe that's good for his stock and he'll end up going higher because of it, especially because there's a lot of bigs in the NBA right now. But on the other hand, there's a lot of other really good players who are not bigs in this class. And as I suspect Oscar would say, there's so many bigs circulating in the NBA right now that you could just not use a draft pick on one and end up with some, biannual exception or whatever.
That's also true. And that was like my philosophy going into last year. And that's also why I had like Kessler. Well, and that's not why I had Kessler really low, but it's part of why I had Kessler really low. But it's also why I had Koloko really low. And both of them are doing great in the NBA. I think it's like, I think if you're able to get a big man on a $1 to $2 million or like a $1 million contract, $2 million contract through the draft or through free agency, like I've kind of retweaked my opinion that like, hey, if you need a big man who can protect the rim, like just guarantee it if you can, and guarantee you have it for 4 years rather than, a 27-year-old who's on his 4th team for who knows what reason. Who
Mason Plumlee disrespect.
Mason Plumlee's getting paid like $11 million a year, man. I don't want to be paying Mason Plumlee.
He about to get a raise. You better not sleep on mixtape Mace.
Man, I got Şengün on my team. I can't.
Oh yeah, you're probably fine. Oscar, just as we kind of tie the knot on this big man stuff. So, it seems like like Neema's saying, Daron is talented, but that's a relative thing for this class. And the last 2 classes we've had quite a few talented bigs, which kind of makes the analysis of Daron, to me, a little more harsh for him, unfortunately. Um, do the centers from last year's class impact how you're viewing Daron, or how did you view those guys, and how does that change? So we have like Koloko, Kessler. I feel like I'm missing one or two very obvious players.
I think those were the two like earliest drafted centers after. Oh wait, I go Duran. Duran. But yeah, no, but I don't know. I was higher on Koloko.
Mark Williams, sorry.
Oh, Mark. Yeah,
oh
Mark,
yeah, that's what I'm thinking of. There we go.
Yeah, I was higher on Koloko. I think I had him like, I can't remember where I had him. I got to him like really late in the process. Well, I had like seen him like, while watching Matherin, but like I hadn't really focused on him until late in the process. Kessler I wasn't as high on. Definitely gonna learn from the Kessler eval in terms of like when the block rate is that crazy and he's like super long and he's deterring all these shots, like it's probably a good bet to return value anywhere outside the lotto. But yeah, I mean, I think those guys just have like much better tools than Daron. I wouldn't really, and I think Daron's like much better offensively, so I wouldn't really use them as a point of reference for him. Yeah.
I'm trying to think. So like you have the guys we mentioned from last year, and Daron is kind of his own thing because he's so young. I think he'll end up developing more skill than he's showing right now. But you're right. Like Kessler and Koloko, like their jobs are pretty straightforward, and I know we all had hopes and wrote a sentence, and every time we tweeted about them about maybe they'll shoot, right? Like Kessler shot quite a bit in high school and college, and Koloko didn't, but when he did, it looked decent and all that stuff. And then you go to the year before, and you had obviously Şengün, who's kind of his own thing. Kai Jones, who's like RIP, whatever the hell the Hornets development did to him to make his jump shot more ugly. My son Isaiah Jackson, who's kind of in the Durham boat in that he's really awesome, but he's still kind of just figuring out how to play basketball. He's pretty young. Garuba, who he's kind of his own weird thing, made weirder by the Rockets being weird.
Don't get me started on that, bro.
Yeah. And then two other guys I wanted to quickly mention, or three really, who in that draft 2021 have already returned pretty good center value, which is Daron Sharp, who I was pretty high on, and he's just kind of like doing his thing quietly right now, as like in like limited minutes. Santi Aldama, who's same thing, just chugging along as one of the many guys on the Memphis role player train who just plug into that machine, that well-oiled machine, and do their thing. He's obviously way different from a lot of these guys. He can put it on the deck a little bit more. He's like a 4 or 5. And then JRE, Jeremiah Robinson Earl, who's like, I don't know if he's a real center, but last year, more so than this year, I think he got hurt a little bit this year, but last year he was a big part of a Thunder defense that was pretty good, even though nobody cared about it except for draft Strickland guest Mark Schindler, who wrote about it a lot for some reason. So like I'm looking at those guys, and what I see are some like the picks I like out of last year and the year before all seem to be ready to fucking roll ASAP in some way. Like Daron Sharp, not a Walker Kessler level rim protector, but he's solid, and you knew he was going to rebound the crap out of the ball from the minute he got to the league. Santi, again, great rebounder in college, and decent shooter as well. JRE was an older veteran player. Villanova, they just churn out ready to contribute NBA guys a lot of the time through the years, and he was the latest of those. And then obviously Walker is pretty. He's like, I mean, like Oscar said, the block rate historic. So we didn't have to wait. That was just immediately, he's not going to win Defensive Player of the Year, but to be a good defensive rookie is pretty astounding. So, just in light of that, Neema, do you think Daron you could put him in lineups in year one and he could contribute, even just like as a bench player?
I think it depends on the team. But I was saying earlier, I think he's way too good for the G League. And so, like, I think it would be kind of like what happened to Daron last year, where you put it, he gets sent to the G League for a couple games, and then he's just absolutely killing the G League, and you got to call him back up. I'm not sure if he's going to, day one, going to be able to help an NBA team. I don't think he's at that level, especially, a lot of the guys who have been able to, like Kessler. It was defensively. Aldama spent all last year in the G League. This year, he's finally coming around. JRE, like you said, was like 23. Daron's gonna be 21 at the beginning of his rookie year. So I think I'm not sure he's gonna be able to impact the game immediately, but I do think he's gonna be too good for the G League. And so I think it's gonna be one of those situations where he's kind of like on the fringe of the lineup. Might have to see some things break his way kind of for him to really make a lineup next year. It also depends on, obviously what team he's on. If he's on a contender versus, on a bad team that happens to have a pick in the 20s or something like that. So I think it does kind of depend, but I could see him being impactful, year two, maybe year three in the league. I also wanted to quickly just go back to one of the statements I said earlier about how this is not like a great big man class. There's a lot of bigs in this class who aren't, in my opinion, like traditional bigs. There's a lot of like connector guys. There's like Coleman Hawkins, Oso Ighodaro, who, are both like 6'9" plus that probably won't play the 5 in the NBA, but they're big and they can play big and they can guard big. But they are awesome with the ball in their hands. And I think that, Daron and Santi Aldama fit that mold of player a little bit more, of guys who, in college had the ball in their hands a ton, are really creative and just, able to minimize their role a little bit to be impactful with all their on-ball skills. So guys like Oso or even Coleman Hawkins, I wouldn't be surprised if they're impacting teams a little bit more than Daron on day one. I do think Daron's probably the better long-term prospect out of either of those. I think Coleman maybe it's a little bit closer with him than Oso, but that's basically my take on the bigs in this class. There's the other guys like Lively and Ware, but that's a whole other box to open. So
yeah, we'll definitely save Lively and Ware for another episode. I have some interesting thoughts on those. The next couple guys we're going to talk about are probably big enough to play some 5 in some situations in the NBA, but whether they are 5s or not depends on what you consider a 5. And that's not the main reason we're going to talk about them. They're really awesome for other reasons. The guy I want to start out with is the person in this group who has gotten the most fanfare, not just this year as a upstart, amazing, nationally recognized freshman, but before that as one of the best high school players in the country. And that's Jarace Walker, who stars at the 4 for one of the best teams in the country, Houston. And his last game on TV the other day, absolutely killed it. 27 points, helped lead a big second half comeback versus Cincinnati. One of the few college games that I watched live these days while I was chilling with some family in New York. Oscar, one of the main reasons I was excited to get you on the pod is you've been watching him since before he got to Houston, and in past cycles of Draft Strickland, some of the most helpful insight that I've gotten from guests has been from people familiar with their game before high school, because that lets you see the player. Yes, the competition is worse because it's high school and they're seniors and they might be playing juniors and sophomores and stuff like that. But, maybe they have a different role. Maybe they handle the ball more or less, or they shoot threes more or less, or something else is different. And you just get to see stuff that you might not see at the college level for a million different reasons. And, I had Bryce Hendricks, who y'all know, on the pod to talk about prospects he saw playing in the Pacific Northwest, including Paolo. And we talked a lot about some of the stuff Paolo showed in high school and Tari Eason that they showed in high school that they didn't show in college. And that stuff ended up being pretty prescient in terms of what they are doing now as really good NBA rookies. So I guess my first question for you, Oscar, is Jarace was like many smart people were like, this is the best high school player in the country. So I guess my question for you is, what made him the best high school player in the country?
Yeah. So Jarace is a really, really versatile defender. He's maybe not the best drop defender, but like any other scheme of pick and roll defense, like he's like a terror as a hedger. He's just like, because he's so long. And
he has like a 7'3" wingspan, right?
7'3", yeah.
Yeah, sheesh.
7'3", and in small spaces, his feet are really, really good. So he gave a lot of trouble to some of the best high school players in the country last year. Like I think, again, in one of the IMG Montford games, he blitzed Derek like 3 times and got a steal like all 3 times. Or like
that's Duke's Derek Whitehead.
Yeah.
Their recently injured, slightly underperforming wing, who we're not talking about today because it makes me sad.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good. So yeah, and then he was also a really, really good secondary rim protector. Maybe a little misleading in like how elite he was, which I'll get to, but definitely really effective in that role as well. And then on offense, he took a leap from his junior year, where he was more of like a play finisher. Jarace was like a secondary ball handler for IMG last year. So there was a lot of attacking off the catch, but also like running some actions, some like pick and roll ball handler reps, which was like shocking to see from this 240-pound 18-year-old. There were definitely some ups and downs, like his handle, not the tightest, and some maybe like not ideal decisions at times, but it was really encouraging to see this huge high school senior like running offense in the NIBC, which is like the best high school conference in the country, basically. Like most teams in that conference are have a rotation like full of future D1 players. So and then also as an interior finisher, just because he's so strong and long, he was really good. So yeah, Jarace kind of just like dominated in a bunch of different roles on a really good IMG team last year.
So for his offense, like running some of the actions, that's obviously notable for a 240-pound human being. In terms of his scoring,
yeah,
and we'll get to this. In Houston, he's very much like an opportunistic scorer who they can also throw the ball to against mismatches and at the end of the clock. And he's not gonna like cross tween Hezzy fucking and one poster dunk it most of the time, but like he can always get his floater off. He can always get a mid-range jumper off. Pretty much those 2 shots he can get like whenever he wants because he's so strong and he's coordinated and he's not bad at them. So that's like one way to score. And then other like he's 240 pounds. There's not much people could do. Wherever he wants to go, he's pretty much gonna go there, unless you throw extra bodies at him, which is what college teams do. But in high school, what was his scoring like? Because I don't think, I'm assuming perhaps naively that no one is going to earn the reputation of best high school player in the country because of defense and surprising like pick and roll craft, right? Like,
yeah,
you need buckets.
No, for sure. Yeah, he was a good scorer. I wouldn't say that was like a strong point of his game relative to all the other skills I talked about, but yeah, he could get to his pull up too, like you said, pretty much whenever he wanted. And even if his like burst and strength combination isn't elite at the college level, I think that there were not many high schoolers who were both big enough to, the point where he couldn't bully them, and then also quick enough to contain them off the bounce. Yeah, I mean, he was definitely like a drive first, like an inside out scorer for sure.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of pull up twos, a little bit of catch and shoot threes, catch and through three stuff. Not a ton, but And the form wasn't great. I think I've talked to you about this, but his like he leaned back a lot, which thankfully he's rectified at Houston. Even if the 3-point numbers aren't amazing, the form is definitely better. But yeah, I mean, he was a good scorer. IMG had like a weird offense because Jaden Bradley was their point guard, but like I'm pretty sure Keontae, George, and Jarace were like the 2 highest usage players, and then Bradley like close behind them. So yeah, he was a secondary creator. I wouldn't say like a dominant scorer, but it definitely wasn't like it wasn't a negative point in his game.
Cool. Yeah, just watching him for Houston, like the games where he scores a lot, he takes more field goals than other games, which seems like an obvious thing to say, but it's not always a given. Something that I know I talked to y'all and I talked to Neema about was like, I find a lot of the time in the college game, it's harder for bigs to put up big scoring numbers unless you're like an absolutely destructive post scorer, like Drew Timme as a senior classman, or Joel Embiid as a freshman, or Julius Randle when he was a freshman at Kentucky. And that's because I don't know if it's a combination of skills or just coaching, but like even if you're nice, the guards control the game, right? Like Jarace is amazing, but Marcus Sasser is still like running the show, and rightfully so. He's really fucking good, but like it's hard. Like you can't just be like, all right, give me the ball in the post. I'm gonna cook this, future chemistry TA right now or whatever. Like unfortunately, which is why if you look at the profile of guys like Scotty Barnes or Franz Wagner or Pat Williams, and other guys who they can clearly score at the NBA level. Well, Pat Will's like asterisk because weird Chicago, but like they didn't shoot that much. Like even Paolo, like his usage was high, but like there was like 5, 6, 7 guard prospects with higher usage than Paolo, even though Paolo is like obviously should have had the highest usage of anybody because he's unstoppable. So I look at a guy like Jarace and I'm thinking, how do I know if he's a guy who's gonna struggle to generate offense or if he's going to find more ways to do that? And I say this not because he needs to do that, right? Like I know Neema is a very large fan of Jabari Smith Jr.
Oh yeah, love him.
No, we don't have to get into Jabari slander hour unless you want to. Then I'm fully prepared to do that. I like Jabari, but anyway, my point is like I like for Franz was the hard one for me, and he's Scotty. Like I thought Scotty would score eventually, but he's already like years ahead of what I thought. I thought he wouldn't start scoring, like averaging 16 points till like year 3 or 4 or something like that. And I know the Raptors kind of suck, but still, they were good last year. And Franz, I mean, I was high on Franz, and he was like, actually, I'm a fucking big wing quasi point guard surprise motherfucker. And Pat Will was the one who I was kind of a little more down on. But he's also the youngest of the group. So who the hell knows what he's going to end up like in 2 years, especially if he gets freed from the shackles of Billy Donovan and friends. So Neema, how are you looking at a guy like Jarace, who's, he's very obviously a lottery pick, very obviously talented, particularly on defense. And we know he does all the little things, right? Like he's scheme versatile. He's a great connective passer. He can hit the short roll. He's an awesome screener. He's a great help defender. And like, just, he kills the little things, and he's good at a lot of the big things. But in terms of just like usage and scoring, like how do you approach that? I'm struggling here.
Yeah, I think where Jarace differs from like guys like Scotty and Franz, or like Scotty's like an incredible athlete at 6'9". I don't think Jarace like some worldly athlete. He's big as hell, and decently quick. Every single one of his blocks are like super powerful, and he flails his arms like insanely for all of them. but I don't think he's some like insane above the rim athlete, gets down the floor super quickly and, just, explosive or anything like that. He's all right. I think he's passable. I think Scotty's just a much better athlete, a much higher motor, especially offensively. And then Franz has like
Franz is like an
otherworldly
actual
balls.
athlete too.
Yeah. And Franz is a great athlete and also has like otherworldly ball skills at 6'10", which like Jarace does not have, in my opinion. He can put the ball on the floor, but like Franz is like crossing people up and taking step back threes. That's not happening with Jarace. I think some of his limitations offensively, like we said, he gets those floaters off. He gets the like step back mid or like turnaround mid range jumpers and stuff like that. But he doesn't get to the rim that well, in my opinion. It doesn't happen very often, especially off the dribble. I think he's a little slow, especially in traffic. He gets into small spaces well, like defensively, but offensively with the ball, it doesn't happen as easily. I think he's gonna have a little bit of trouble on offense kind of coming in, but I do think like you were saying with the setting, playing at U of H where he's not going to get one, your leash is super short. If you mess up a couple times, it happened early in the season. He had a couple bad minutes and, all of a sudden you're playing 20 minutes in the game instead of 35. Terrence Arsenault is not getting any minutes right now because he had a couple bad games in a row and now Sampson doesn't want him in the rotation. So, his leash is a little shorter. The good thing is that, unlike Arsenault, they know Jarace is a one and done. So they're giving him the minutes to make sure he like gets drafted where he deserves to be. But they have 3 ball handlers in that lineup with Tremont Mark, Jamal Shed, who's arguably one of the best point guards, if like not just in the conference, but in the NCAA. And then Marcus Sasser, who, despite having a bad season, is still one of the best guards in the NCAA. So, that's just a stacked team. But I think offensively for him, it's going to have to be a little bit more as a play finisher, especially right off the bat. Like, I think you're going to be on a team that probably also has some elite guards, bro. Like, a lot of these bad teams, OKC has Shea, the Rockets, let's not talk about it, but they're gonna put the ball in the hands that aren't Jarace if
they're gonna put the hands in the ball in the hands of guards who like the ball in their hands.
Yeah, that's gonna be the case. The Pistons have Cade and Ivy, so a lot of these bad teams like already kind of have guys who are gonna be a little bit more ball heavy. I think Jarace is going to find offense a little similarly to what's happening in Houston of, it's going to be a lot of stuff off the catch. I think that is probably what's best for him, especially right now, like little dribble pull-ups, attacking mismatches, attacking tilted defenses, stuff like that. He needs to improve on his foot speed. He needs to improve on his verticality. All of that comes from probably having the worst knees I've seen in years. And that's something that I know U of H is working on. They're working on daily. I have like just being from Houston and knowing some people who have gone through that system, both as players and managers, just being able to pick their brains on what's happening in that room. And they're working on his development, especially athletically, like pretty well. But that dude is extremely pigeon-toed. His knees face each other every chance they get. If you want him to be the athlete that like his body kind of allows him to be, that's something that's going to need to get fixed. The valgus in his knees, just his overall stance, because it slows him down a lot and it really messes with his mobility. It's honestly amazing how good he is defensively with that limitation, because he flies around the court like it's nothing. He can cover almost anybody on the court, regardless of size, speed, whatever it may be. So his defensive ability, like you said, he's for sure a lotto guy, and it's going to be off that alone. Anything he can bring offensively, any improvement he can bring offensively, it's just kind of icing on the cake. I don't think he's like a top 20, 25 offensive player in this class, but he's probably like a top 2 defender, and like including Wemby. So I think that alone, is going to get him minutes. It's going to get him into rotations, and just any improvement he can make, both in terms of like his overall flexibility and athleticism, but also just being able to, be a little bit quicker with some of his decision making on the ball will really help him in the next level. I don't think he's going to be Scotty or Franz. Pat will, obviously, injuries and whatnot, and situation is different. But I think Scotty and Franz are just they have a few other outlier skills that Jarace doesn't have offensively that benefit them. So I think he's gonna have a bit of an uphill battle kind of coming in offensively.
So you mentioned the physical stuff that they're working with him on, like mobility and when players have the severe valgus, which for people who aren't loser nerds like us, that means, and or people who just have knee problems and are old or washed like Prez, who also know what that means. But it's basically when your knees collapse towards each other, you're doing a dance move or something. And it's usually from a combination of things. It means there's some weakness probably in the hips relative to the rest of your body strength. And that's kind of the fascinating thing to me, because usually the players who have that, they come into the league weak, right? Like the clearest example I can think of for that is Kevin Durant, who still has knee collapse like crazy because he's really tall. And because he's tall, even though he's skinny, that's like a lot of pressure on his legs, and his legs are like fucking hockey sticks. And he helps alleviate that by his knees coming together when he shoots and when he jumps and stuff like that. He's like a weird outlier athlete in that even when he was 17, 18, he could still jump high as shit, despite all that. But with Jarace, he's built like Julius Randle. He's like 240 pounds. And I'm sure, like, it'll be interesting to see what he participates in the combine, because, like, I don't even think he has that high body fat. Like, he looks pretty fucking chiseled for a 240-pound dude.
He's built crazy. Like,
he looks like a football player or like an anime character or something. Yeah, so you're talking about knee collapse because of probably the weight combined with some muscles that are just not strong enough to handle that. And even though this is like an unusual situation, part of me is like, all right, if they already got him cooking on the right solutions in Houston, and you can't fix this. This is very hard to fix something like this in season because it takes months of rehab and strength building and body reconfiguration, really. But isn't that kind of like a low-hanging, like, this is not something we don't know how, this isn't like a jump shot where you're like, well, I don't know if it'll take when we adjust his mechanics. Like, no, we know the solutions here, right? Like, if I'm a team in the, go ahead.
It's just that, like, valgus isn't something that gets fixed often. And so like a jump shot gets fixed, can get fixed pretty often. Like, you see guys come around and develop jump shots, but like valgus is something that, it, like you said, it takes years to fix. Especially with like how pronounced it is in Jarace. I also don't, like, the body weight might attribute to it, but like I don't see a path to him losing weight. Like I think he's extremely built out. I don't think he should lose weight. I think it benefits him so much defensively. But like, if he's able to fix it, like you said, like the sky's the limit kind of for him. There's been other guys who have valgus, just as bad as he does. Jabari Smith was very recent last year. His is pretty bad. But like you said, similar to Kevin Durant, he's extremely skinny. And then the number one model that always comes to mind is Sekou Doumbouya, whose knees touch each other basically when he's walking. And like, just like the other two, he's really skinny. So Jarace is really just like an outlier on something that we don't see get fixed, or like fixed to the point where like he can have his full mobility. And I don't think that will ever kind of get there, but any improvement is good for him. Like you said, it's something that is getting fixed. It's something that, will slowly get better over time. And it addresses a lot of like the negative issues in his game. So even if it gets, 30, 40% better, that's still, a huge improvement for him, and what he can bring offensively and defensively.
You're gonna make me go down a rabbit hole and try to look for prospects who have had that issue and had it fixed.
I gotta find a picture of Seku's knees because we did a project on it in Syracuse whenever I was in undergrad, and I took sports science class. The guy who taught it was formerly a Timberwolves like director of pro personnel, or not pro personnel, like player, what is it, medicine, whatever, something like that. And he showed us like Seku's pre-draft like workout, like shin angles and knee angles and stuff like that. It was atrociously bad. And he said he had never seen anything like it in his years working in basketball. So just fun little tidbit there. Valgus is pretty bad in some guys.
Yeah. It's something that I've learned about the personal experience, and it's one of those, like, I know it will be a fire deep dive. I just got to not be lazy and actually do it. So that means TBD on if we'll ever see it. Oscar, any other last thoughts on Jarace? Like, is it taking him top 10? Is that kind of shaky if all of his value is tied up in just elite defensive production, or do all the other like connectory things, the screen setting, the passing, the rebounding, the help defense, do all of that things kind of make it less of a daunting prospect for a team to take Jarace top 10? Because I was kind of just assuming he would go in the 7, 8, 9, 10 range, but like, it's very rare to see like defense first prospects who are not centers, right, in the top 10.
Yeah, I think this, like, his college season so far has kind of exposed like a lot of holes in his offensive game that maybe weren't there at IMG. And I think that like ties back to his athletic profile. I have a bit of a theory about his athleticism. So I think that his perception, like just around, not just like draft Twitter, but in general, like the perception of his athleticism was kind of boosted by a couple of his like aesthetic traits. So at IMG and even like now at Houston, he tries to swat every single block. Like, he doesn't go for tips. He tries to send everything, like
he tries to send a message.
Right. And like that can get into trouble like sometimes, because if he doesn't time it up perfectly, like all of a sudden, he's not getting any contact on the ball. But when he does make contact, it like flies, either like way off the backboard or like out of bounds. So I think people saw that and then paired that with like when he dunks, especially like uncontested dunks, he'll like shake on the rim sometimes. And it just like gives off this like vibe, this like super explosive athlete. But his lift off one foot isn't the best. Like, his burst is pretty average, especially like after his first and second step. Like, his long speed isn't the best. And I think that people kind of assumed like we have this super strong, forward initiator who's showing shooting and handling flashes. And he's like this great defender, like easy top 10, right? But then he got to Houston and he's had a lot of trouble as a driver, like Neema said. He hasn't been getting to the rim much. And I think a big reason for that is he doesn't proactively leverage his strength, which is like by far the asset that he should be using the most on offense, right? Like, he's not the quickest, not the best leaper. His handle isn't the best. So if he's not going to use his strength, he's going to get into trouble. I think that, he, like, a lot of times when he should be like bumping or like leveraging how wide his shoulders are to like spin off a guy, he likes to go for more like guard-esque handles. So like a lot of behind the back dribbles or like east-west stuff. And then when you combine that with the fact that, he like leans away from contact a lot, even like stunts, like he won't even like try to like gather and like gather through stunts. Like, he'll like just like throw the kick out every time. And then when you pair that with the fact that he loves his floater, which is like, it's a pretty good floater, but he definitely shoots it too much. So he really hasn't been getting to the rim or getting to the line at all. Like, his free throw rate is really low for a guy who takes mostly twos. It's like, like pretty historically low, I'd say. Not historically low for a lotto prospect for sure. So I don't know. I wasn't expecting him to be so rough as a driver. And I think that him kind of improving in that area depends on the valgus, like you guys discussed. And I think the valgus also, by the way, has an impact on him as a finisher, because a lot of the time when he's like loading up on drives where he does get all the way to the rim, his like core is like sunk into his, like it just like sinks a little bit because his knees are kind of outward. It's hard to describe like through saying it, but yeah, he's jumping from a point where like a 6'3" guard would be jumping, and then he's just like not that good of a leaper either. So like he goes for a lot of these like 3 foot like wide angle touch shots, which are just like not the diet you want for a 6'8", 240-pound tank. So he's this weird mix of like really rough driver at the moment, but like it seems like all of the things he needs to do to like improve are like pretty low hanging, like you said. So yeah, I'm not like completely sure where I'm at with him yet. I think that like there's a lot of conflicting factors that I need to think about. He's also been playing better as of late, which is good. I haven't gotten to like the super recent tape as much. I don't know if it's just that his like floaters are going in more, or if it's like really like a process change. But yeah, super intrigued by Jarace.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where he is by the end of the year. This is the last thing I'll say, because I have noticed, we all check these guys' stats pretty much every week, and both his field goal attempts per 100 and his free throw rate are like slowly ticking up. His free throw rate's still not good. It's 26 on the season, which is not good for anyone, let alone a tank. But his field goal attempts per 100 is at 22 right now, which is a lot. That means he's like not shy about putting up shots, and we can definitely like, we're rightfully going to put a microscope to these guys, but the fact is, like, if you're taking a lot of shots and making a lot of shots, like, and being productive for your team's offense, then, maybe whenever I see a prospect where I'm like, they seem to be more productive individually and for a team than some of the skills would indicate, or in spite of certain flaws, then I have to go back and see if I'm missing something. So, this he's fascinating because he's not as cut and dry as a prospect as I think a lot of people see him, even though he's really great, and pretty much everybody agrees he's really great. So it'll be really interesting to see where he goes. Who knows? Maybe this draft is stacked. Maybe he falls out of the top 10 and he gets into the range of a Knicks straight up. I'm not going to rule it out. But anyway, we got other prospects.
More fours, really, Prez? More fours.